In this episode of the IT Experts podcast, we're going to help you understand what automatic pen testing is and why you need it in your MSP in 2023. Welcome to the IT Experts podcast, the only podcast to help MSPs scale to 1 million, and if already there, get to 5 and go faster. At the end of the day, isn't it all about building a business that works for you rather than you for it? I hope you enjoy the show. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the IT Experts podcast. On the podcast today, I've gone all the way across to Atlanta, Georgia to catch up with Alton, who's the founder and principal security consultant from Vonahi. Welcome to the show, Alton. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, we just had a little chat about the fact he's not far from Florida and it's not that much warmer than it is in the UK, which makes me feel really quite comfortable today at 11 degrees and you're only at 16 or whatever Fahrenheit you guys talk about. But anyway, great. Thanks for connecting and great to hear you guys are all good over there. In today's show, we are going to be sharing with MSPs, going in a little bit of the detail and into a bit of the depth around pen testing and more importantly, the automated pen testing and what it's all about. But before we jump into that, set the scene, Alton. Let us know who you are, what you do, who you help, and kind of how we ended up talking today.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Alton Johnson, the founder here at the Vonahi Security, and my background is all in the pen testing space. So I don't have a super crazy business background or anything like that. I was just a pen tester. Yeah. So I've just been a pen tester for the last 10 years and eventually discovered some deficiencies in the way that we did pen testing. And that's what kind of led me into figuring out ways to make pen testing a lot better for me personally as a pen tester. And then eventually that kind of trickled into turning into a business, which is what we do now. So we automate a lot of what I used to do manually. But yeah, that's what we do today. I've been hacking since I was 11 years old. Didn't realize you can get paid for it until I got much older. And so that's it. So that's how I got started in pen testing 10 years ago.
That's fantastic, isn't it? Everyone worries about hacking until it becomes really cool and really trendy, and then it's like, oh yeah, now I get paid for doing this. And you hear these young kids who have been caught hacking into the FBI and all these different things, and damn well the FBI are onto them to employ them to find out what they're doing. And so is poacher come gamekeeper. That's one of the terms we use in the UK. So that's who we got on the show today. So get your questions ready. So you're working with MSPs right now. What's the offering that you're providing MSPs? What's the service that they're really screaming out for?
Yeah, absolutely. So Vonahi Security, we work with a lot of MSPs, MSSPs, and basically what we're doing is enabling them to offer penetration testing. In the past, prior to me starting Vonahi Security, to do pen testing for an MSP, it would cost a lot of money. It would only be done once a year. In some cases, it could be pretty inefficient too, because we're all human. We make mistakes. We get overloaded, overwhelmed, things like that. So what we've done at Vonahi Security is created a product that essentially automates everything that I used to do from Monday to Friday, from the discovery, the penetration testing, the reporting, and even elaborating on the results through some, the help center and stuff like that. So we work with a lot of MSPs, and our goal is to get them into the game with penetration testing and allow them to make a lot of money from doing it too.
Okay, so let's just, as usual, we normally have a show script, and then as soon as we start talking, I go off on a different tangent. MSPs that we're working with at the Growth Hub here, obviously security is a really massive issue, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on about how they can protect themselves and everything like that. But providing monthly support is core business. Okay. We've been to some events back end of last year, and they were absolutely flooded with security vendors selling this. There was someone there who was doing, automated. I think it was pen testing, or they were doing some type of other type of security. As you can tell, I didn't talk to them very much because it was kind of quite over. But the word on the street was, wow, there's a lot of security vendors here, and I wonder sometimes whether or not the MSP really, because it's quite a scary subject. And it's a risky subject. And if you veer away from it, then you're never going to get, if you don't have it as a product stack, then you're not going to get, breached, or you're not going to get involved or known as a security vendor. What's your kind of view on if an MSP is listening to this right now and they're sort of going, yeah, but hang on a minute, I don't think I'm really interested in this because it's scary. I don't really know too much about it. I'd rather bring in a consultant to do it. What would your advice or comments or suggestions be to them about this, about the fact that maybe they don't need to worry about it, or maybe it's something that's going to become essential for an MSP in the future? What's your view on that?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things about what we've done is we've simplified that process. It's actually a little bit more intimidating for an MSP to talk to a consulting firm to do this manually because, there's a lot of stuff involved, right? You've got to talk to salespeople, you've got to talk to project managers and consultants, and you've got to go back and forth with a lot of like information exchange. There's a lot of time involved. It's very expensive, and it could be just very overwhelming just to even get started, right? Because you're just like, all right.
Yeah.
For me to get a pen test is going to cost me how many tens of thousands of dollars, and it's not going to be delivered until 3 months from now. And for an MSP, that's a complicated process, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we've done to basically allow MSPs to not have to deal with that is to really simplify the process. Everything we do, we try to keep it as simple as possible because there's a lot of complicated stuff in the world, a lot of different complicated products, requires a lot of knowledge and a lot of configurations. And so for us, all an MSP has to do is just know the IP addresses, like whatever the IP address range is for their customer. And that's literally it. When you want to get started, what are their IP addresses? Who's the client, of course, and that's it. So there's not a lot of like back and forth. It's not a huge process to get up and running. And that's something that we've really put a lot of work into simplifying. Because to your point, it's a noisy world. There's a lot of vendors, so a lot of different things going on. So we want to keep that as simple as possible.
Yeah. So let's get back to basics. What is pen testing? And then we'll come on to automated pen testing and kind of how it works. What in its simplest form, what is it?
Yeah. So think of a penetration test as proving that a vulnerability could be exploited and then proving the impact of that. So if you think about a vulnerability assessment, right? A vulnerability assessment is just simply identifying the vulnerability, and it's telling you what could possibly happen one day in however many years if somebody was to exploit it. But a penetration test actually it attempts to exploit the vulnerability and show the customer exactly what that vulnerability could lead to, right? Because the question is, all right, based on these, 30,000 vulnerabilities that is in this report, what should I focus on first? The penetration test will say, all right, well, based on this critical finding here or this low finding, we were able to get access to credit card data, database information, intellectual property, all of the things that you want to protect, right? So it's proving that it's possible by attempting to exploit that. The analogy I like to use is if you think of a house, a vulnerability assessment will basically walk up, twist the doorknob and say, hey, your door is unlocked. If somebody was to get in, I could use the bathroom. I could, find your safe and do a bunch of stuff, and it's good that you know that, but a penetration test will actually open up the door and go inside and come out and say, hey, here's your social security number. Here's everything that you want to protect. I've also stole your $15 million that you left on the dresser. It's proving that it's possible.
Into my house.
Exactly. Now, when you show somebody the proof, it hits home a lot differently than just saying these are the things that could happen. So it just hits home a lot different.
That's a really great analogy. And I think the other thing we mustn't do as well is we mustn't assume that every MSP and everybody in the channel understands what this is and how it works, because I don't think they do. And I think that's where this confusion and this, non-clarity, if things are not right and people don't understand exactly what it is, then they're just going to veer away from it when, we're going to dive into why it is really quite important. Give us a quick real life example of that vulnerability testing. Would it be that you could go in kind of like through Office 365, for example, and the password might not be safe? And then what would it typically show? What would the end result be? Just because I'm interested actually now of getting into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So typically vulnerability assessments, they'll say stuff like that, like weak password policy or like unprotected password share, or this computer is vulnerable to this patching deficiency, and here's why it's bad. Here's all the things that could happen. So we see that a lot, right? We see a lot of vulnerability assessments that just say, these are the things that we can tell that are wrong, but we can't prove that they would result into something significant. Because when you think of like a breach today, right? The breach is basically proving that, all right, it was possible to exploit something to get access to something. But the vulnerability assessment just says, hey, you could get breached. But the pen test is saying, hey, I did breach you and here's what I got out of it.
Right. Okay. So it'll bring your eBay password out and your credit card details, that you're the only one who knows what it's kind of about and everything like that, which is where that really brings it home. Okay, so Let's get into the meat and the bones on them. So You've had these, previously we've had people who do pen testing like yourself there, is it ethical hackers you call yourselves, is it? So you get paid to do it, whatever it might be. And you've run a load of code, you've been working on the machine for, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it might be. And you've come up with this report and said, hey, look, here's the bolt and the braces. This is the problem that we've got, kind of the problem and the challenge that we've got. How have you managed to automate that? Is it as simple as that whole process that's just been automated at the touch of a button?
Yeah, so as a pen tester, like in a traditional world, basically our process would be, we get on the phone with the customer, we have a whole conversation about, what it is that we do, kind of talk about the logistics, when we want to get started. And then we kick off the test as a pen tester. And what we're doing as pen testers is we're running a bunch of tools and we're trying to determine, where can we find vulnerabilities? And then we're trying to exploit those vulnerabilities by using more tools. And basically, there's just a lot of thinking and logic involved, right? You're trying to make decisions based on, the results of certain tools that you're running. And then after that, you basically compile all of your results and you put it into your report. And you start to write the report, explain why certain things are bad, provide evidence and things like that. And that's so we've automated that entire process. One of the things that penetration testers really hate doing is writing reports because it's very time consuming. It's just boring. You're a hacker. You don't want to write a document for 3 days.
I want to get in.
Yeah, exactly. And what that turns into though is as a pen tester, you'll see with pen testers over time, they start to take shortcuts in reports. They start to leave out some details that they don't think is, personally relevant or as impactful. Or in the later part of the year, it gets very overwhelming for the security vendors and they have a lot of work going on. And so you start seeing them drop the ball in different areas. But what we've done, we've automated that entire process. So you don't have to worry about a human making typos or missing information or lacking evidence or lacking clarity in some of the reports because we've taken the reports and stuff like that I used to do manually, and we've automated that process of writing those reports, and also obviously added more clarity, added more evidence, and so it's very consistent with providing value in the in the results. So that, you don't have to worry about just a lot of things that we have to deal with when it comes to just dealing with humans.
Yeah. They take time off sick and take time to travel, and in the UK at the minute they do all sorts of funny things like striking. But I've never heard a computer strike before. But anyway, we probably should keep politics out of this podcast. But one of the questions I've got from a non-technical point of view is, we've had the original pen test that's cost, as you say, tens of thousands of dollars, pounds. Other currencies are available, and then you've got this, which is a relatively inexpensive product. Is it kind of as good if we were to ask you to run a pen test, on a business right now, and then we got someone to do exactly the same thing? Is there going to be a difference in the report and what we get? And, there must be some kind of difference, surely.
Yeah. So actually, in our process, we actually have a proof of concept, right? And in that process, we've had a lot of MSPs, MSSPs. They basically take our results and they compare it to last year when they had a manual pen tester do it. And so what they find is the results would be pretty much exactly the same. If not, we provide a little bit more value in our reports just because, we have a lot more data to be able to provide to that customer. But yeah, I mean, when I was a pen tester and I started creating the code to automate myself, no one that I worked with even knew because the quality of my work was exactly the same. My reports look exactly the same.
Okay.
All of the things that I put into the evidence, it was exactly the same. In fact, I had people starting to ask hey, how'd you get this chart? We don't, and I would just play it off by saying, yeah, I just spent a little bit more time. I, did Excel, I had a template that I created or whatever. I just made up excuses. But in reality, I had the report generator that I created automating my reports for me and adding more and more things over time. So yeah, if you compare it to a traditional pen test, I mean, you'll see that it's faster and it's going to provide more results because it's a computer. It's technology.
Cool. The answer is the answer at the end of the day. But when, typically the human brain is, but if it's automated, it's going to be not as good quality and it's going to be a lot cheaper. Okay, it's going to be cheaper because it's going to kind of run without us. But, what's that all about? So I felt I needed to ask that. So really simple, kind of from what you were saying is, just give us your IP address and the company name and we're kind of off to work. Let's talk about, to start with, touch on this a little bit later on. There's a lot of rumblings going on in Europe at the minute about the NIS security standards, which we don't know too much about at the moment, but we do know that the security world is deeming MSPs as a very, very important part of the food chain for hackers, really. And if you've got 3, 4, 5,000 endpoints, whatever it might be, in your MSP, and you're not secure yourself, this is going to start to show up in government compliance, in security standards, and all of this kind of other stuff. So Is it as simple as the first step is that the MSP needs to mark their own homework first and go and check their front door and make sure they haven't left £1,500 on the dresser and things like that before we move on to the clients? What does the MSP need to do, and why is it going to be such a great thing for them?
Yeah, it's actually something that we recommend too, right? So we like to see MSPs running this on their own network because it not only like helps them identify some common gaps that they may have, but if they have some of the issues, if they have some critical issues, there's a pretty good chance that those issues are also existing on their customers' network, because that's, if their network isn't secure, it's probably because they either didn't know or something new came out or whatever. But it's a good way to identify, themselves as like a baseline. You kind of want to practice what you preach. But then the other thing too is obviously helps them get more familiar with, what is pen testing? How do I interpret the results? How do I fix the issues that the pen test report comes back with? And then as they get more comfortable and familiar with doing it on their own network, then it makes it a lot easier for them to communicate and educate their customers on the importance of security and continuous security and things like that. So we do recommend that they're running on their own network. And it's just, to your point, right? Hackers, they want to target MSPs because if you get access to one MSP's environment, and let's say they're doing things like not the right way, then that really gives you the keys to the kingdom, for every other customer, and that's just a massive issue to deal with,
And that's why I think, particularly over in the UK, I'm not quite sure what's happening in the States, but particularly in the UK, they're looking at bringing in governance, bringing in standards, bringing in a lot of control around what the MSP has, because they understand the dangers of it, probably since the pandemic, I would imagine. Personally, I think it's going to put a real shift in the MSP market. I think you're going to get a lot of smaller MSPs who are just going to go, I'm not up for this. I can't be bothered. Who wants to buy my order book? I'd rather go and do something else with my business. And, so I think there's going to be quite an interesting shift over the next 12, 18 months anyway, because of the economic crisis and all the other bits and pieces that are going on as well. But for the MSP, have you seen this affecting their ability to get cyber insurance? Because obviously every single year cyber insurance goes up, and it used to be, that's all right, you've got that with Microsoft Essentials, that'll give you 25k sort of thing. But now it's like, this is a real thing, isn't it? So how does what you guys are doing, and how does the automated pen testing help or hinder, insurance?
Yeah, it's a pretty good point too, because I remember when I started Vonahi Security and I tried to get in with the insurance company, it was a little bit challenging because, you saw a breach every once in a blue moon, but like it wasn't as major as it is nowadays. So there wasn't really like a lot of like importance behind it at the time. But nowadays, I mean, you see cyber insurance companies saying, hey, in order for us to insure you, you need to provide us a report to show that, you're doing your due diligence from a security perspective. And so we're seeing it quite a lot, like, and that's one of the good things for us too. And I think this is why Vonahi Security is kind of perfect timing, especially with the costs and stuff like that. Rather than having to go out shopping for pen testing companies and having to pay a lot of money just to simply satisfy like something like cyber insurance, you could use us and we can simplify that process and allow MSPs to make money and grow their business by customers who need to satisfy requirements like cyber insurance. And so we're going to see, more and more like strict requirements from cyber liability companies, wanting customers to do penetration testing, especially as like more automated testing services like ours become, more common in the world. I think we'll see a pretty big shift there. But obviously, they don't want to just start insuring people without knowing that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing from a security perspective. And what you'll see even in that regard is some discounts being offered, right, from some of those insurance companies, just to make sure that, hey, look, we'll discount your services in order to if you did a pen test. So yeah, we're seeing that as the driving. It's like kind of a pretty big reason that we're seeing a lot of MSPs come to us today, where it used to be like PCI and stuff like that. Still is, but not as much.
And I guess now the insurance companies are going to be looking for obviously all the ways to get out of it. And before you wouldn't even have thought about doing a pen test because it's going to be tens of thousands of dollars or whatever. And it's like, well, what benefits is that going to give me? But now that's going to help you with insurance, but and keep the MSP nice and tight as well, because you're going to know how often do people, how often do the MSPs that you work with, how often do they run these scans on their own businesses?
Yeah, it's so we used to see, traditionally penetration testing has been like this once a year kind of process, right? Like you just do it once a year for like compliance reasons. And what we're trying to do, and we're starting to see a lot more conversations around this, is we're trying to help MSPs and the customers do penetration testing more continuously, right? Doesn't mean every day, it doesn't have to be every day, but something more than just once a year. Maybe 4 times a year, 3 times a year, just something more frequent. So what we see MSPs who work with us, they typically start off, they've been doing it once a year. or they haven't been doing it at all, and they'll get into the platform, see how easy it is, and then they'll start to do assessments once a month, which is pretty cool because I mean, you basically log in one time, spend maybe 10 minutes setting up a schedule, you deploy your virtual machine, and that's it. You could get a pen test every month and never have to log back into the platform other than to get your reports and the results. Exactly.
So growing your MSP then with it. So we've got the MSP covered and tested, and he's nice and secure now, and obviously understood what he needs to do there. Just quickly, actually, do you then help the guys to then put the money back in the house once it's been stolen in terms of setting themselves up, or is it do you just do the testing, or do you provide a service where you can help the MSP become more compliant, or should they know what they're doing anyway?
Yeah, so what we do is we provide the test for them to let them know like what issues they have. And we do also like help educate them on like how to fix those issues. So we can provide some support in that regard so that they can become, more educated. Because we do understand, pen testing is pretty new for a lot of MSPs, right? And so they're going to need a lot of handholding to get in the door and understand what's going on. And so we help them with that entire process.
Yeah, cool. That's really good. That's really good. So, as I say, we've got the MSP nice and secure. In terms of growing your MSP doing this, now we touched on the C word a minute ago, compliance. If you've got a legal firm, or you've got a firm that's got a health and all sorts of other government data, when someone needs to have good IT, it's very different to somebody who wants to have good IT. So compliance is always a nice, easy pickings for an MSP when they want to try and niche and want to get into a bit of a market. Now, if you're, again, we were just talking about cyber insurance, more and more businesses probably don't even know that they need cyber insurance. So that's going to be something that's going to come out. So this is definitely going to help them to get that cyber insurance and keep themselves safe. What other ways have you seen that MSPs have grown their businesses using the tactics and the things that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, definitely. From a penetration testing, that's been, a pretty big, obviously for like, to your point, cyber liability insurance, there's also like PCI, there's SOC 2, of course. We typically see those in like web apps requirements. But one of the good things too about the product is that MSPs could use it for prospecting, right? So they don't have to like commit to anything significant, in the beginning. They could use the tool to like do free prospecting for their customers and be able to like get them in the door. Right, because typically once you provide a little bit of value and say, hey, these are the things that we saw was wrong, we could probably find a little bit more if you wanted to sign up, right? That's a really good way to like start to build that relationship with the customer and even start talking about cybersecurity. So that's a really good way to like kind of get in the door. And like I mentioned before too, the price points for us, are less than half of the cost of a single traditional pen test, and they could do that continuously for that same price, which is, if I was an MSP, I would be super excited about something like that because
that's for a year, is it? So would they pay like an annual fee to have access to the system, and then they could run as many tests on that single IP as they wanted to, sort of thing?
Exactly. So that cost is once a year. Is about a third of the cost of a single traditional pen test, and it could do it continuously, come back in for remediation scans quarterly, and still be less than half of the cost of a single traditional pen test, which is pretty mind-blowing.
I'm just interested now because when you start mentioning money, it excites me about how this is really good value. If you were then to deploy it to one of your customers, would that be then another fee, another membership you need to pay?
Yeah, so we do have a model. So we have two models, right? You can have one model that allows you to service all of your customers. It's a little bit more flexible. Obviously, you need to, yeah. And then there's another model that's more towards like client A needs a pen test. We do one for this company. The next one needs a pen test. We do another one for that company. A little bit less of a commitment up front, but there are two ways to satisfy both of those needs.
I wasn't planning on going into your pricing model on this show, but it was because for full disclosure, this hasn't been sponsored. I was just having a great chat with Alton. I thought, right, we need to talk to everybody about this. So what you're saying is, and if an MSP's got whichever package, whatever it might be, they could then offer a free vulnerability scan, couldn't they? To then, because there are certain types of other free scans you can get out there at the moment, aren't there, that people are using for lead generation and for, kind of like, I suppose, scaring prospects, for want of a better phrase, into having a conversation with them. But this is like the next level. So do they have to go full deep, or could you do like a high level one and then, that might be a bit cheaper or something like that? How would that work?
Yeah, so both of our models, they both offer like penetration testing and vulnerability assessments. But typically, what we see our MSP partners do is they'll do like a vulnerability assessment for that prospect, and then present the report and say, "Hey, this is just the vulnerability assessment, and we found a lot. Yeah.
So I'm going to open up your front door that you think's locked, and then once we've got that in and I've frightened the life out of you with that, we're then going to go in and rob everything you got in your house. I'm getting this now. How can it
Exactly.
work for you? That would be really cool. This is really, really interesting and exciting stuff, and I think something that everybody needs to kind of listen to and and understand how the world is going to change over the next couple of years, and how people are now automating these really important security systems and bringing stuff into play. Alton, so look, thanks ever so much for that security fire hose that we've just doused the whole IT Experts podcast listeners with. Really appreciate your time and effort and expertise this afternoon putting the show together. Time for a bit of a shameless plug. Do you want to just let everybody know, if we've piqued their interest, if you've helped them with a bit of a conversation going on in their head, how they can get in contact with you, and if you've got anything to offer the listeners of the show?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would definitely check out our website, www.vonahi.io. That's VONAHI.io, and sign up for a free proof of concept. And so, like I said before, we've simplified the process. We think about this a lot. How do we simplify it even more? And it's very challenging because it's so simple as it is. So I would definitely sign up for a proof of concept just to see, what it is, how it compares to your last pen test, the cost, things like that. And we offer a lot of assistance with helping, MSPs get on board too. So, you can white label the platform. We have a lot of sales enablement materials. We'll hop on calls with your customers to help you explain certain things if you're having some difficulty understanding the report. So we're literally trying to do everything we can to help MSPs get in the door and practice security with their customers. And so I would highly recommend checking out our website and see what we have to offer. I think they'll be happy.
Checking out for that. And if people want to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
I would reach out to us from the website. That's probably the best way to get to me. Yep.
Cool. No, that's absolutely fine. That's brilliant stuff. Well, look, thanks ever so much again for your time this afternoon. It's been really, really interesting, really insightful. I love these kind of conversations that we have all around that. Well, all the best of luck with Vonahi and everything in the future. Hope you have an amazing year. Sounds like you've already decided that you are going to, so that's absolutely brilliant. And I look forward to catching up with you guys soon. Take care now.
Sweet. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
So I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, I'd love it if you could leave a rating and review on your favourite podcast platform. If you want to learn more about how to take your MSP to $1 million, or if you're already there, go faster, then come and join Stuart Warwick and myself in the Scale with Confidence Facebook group. The link is in the show notes. You go and enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.